Tsai's diploma displayed at D-Card. Patience bears fruit. A month later, Dr. Dennis Peng, host of True Voice of Taiwan, declared on his own Facebook and later his popular YouTube talk show that the credential displayed on Professor Lee's Facebook bore the wrong signature. This proclamation was an indirect challenge to the legitimacy of Ms. Tsai's doctoral degree. A month after Professor Lee showcased the diploma in question, Ms. Tsai perhaps believed that Dr. Peng's indirect challenge did not truly pose a threat to her. Therefore, at last, she showcased a doctoral certificate bearing an embossed stamp of certificate attestation on July 9th in front of the staff of D-Card, a social media company based in Taipei, Taiwan. A day after, July 10th, she also displayed that certificate on her own Facebook page. The certificate Ms. Tsai showcased at D-Card was contained in a clear plastic bag, which caught glare from light reflection. Yet many photos were taken in the D-Card visit and posted publicly on her Instagram. There, I was able to obtain a clear photo of the same certificate sans the glare, for the purpose of making a comparison below. Tsai and Lee showed the same diploma. Here, I'd like to stress one more time that the doctoral certificate Tsai proudly displayed at D-Card was a counterfeit. If it were the genuine article, the signature scribbled on the certificate would be that of Lord Randolph Cork, Vice-Chancellor of the University of London from 1981 to 1985. Nonetheless, the signature on Tsai's certificate was Adrian Smith, Vice-Chancellor of the same university from 2012 to 2018. How did Smith's signature resurrect itself on a diploma awarded 35 years ago? This signature is a telling clue that this certificate is bogus. Less than a week after Ms. Tsai showcased her certificate at D-Card, He Defen, Professor Emeritus at National Taiwan University, held a de facto press conference on True Voice of Taiwan on July 12th. There, she accused the diploma was a counterfeit. Professor He's press conference posed a direct challenge against the validity of Tsai's PhD diploma. Our investigation is 100% behind Professor He's press conference statements, in that we have airtight proofs to substantiate Dr. Peng's and Professor He's testaments. Later, we will present them in a thorough breakdown. Professor He's accusation carries a lot of gravitas, as it concerns academic honesty, law compliance, and political integrity with respect to a figure who is both a scholar and a national leader with supreme power. Nonetheless, Ms. Tsai has never responded to these allegations as of the initial publication date of the report on August 27, 2019. Interestingly, Dr. Falong Shi, as co-director of LSE's Taiwan Research Program, and DPP legislator Wang Dingyu came together to defend Ms. Tsai in their respective Facebook posts. Tsai's handheld PhD diploma at D-Card, July 10, 2019. They both argued that the doctoral certificate Ms. Tsai showed at D-Card was a 2015 replacement, so that it bore the signature of Adrian Smith, Vice-Chancellor of the University of London from 2012 to 2018, and that led us to wonder, did President Tsai approve or disapprove the song and dance that Shi and Wang came up with? Also, did Ms. Tsai submit her credentials prior to running for presidential elections in 2012 and 2016 respectively? Why did she need the 2015 replacement? Moreover, both LSE and the University of London had a vigorous replacement application process in place. Was the certificate Ms. Tsai presented with Adrian Smith's signature truly a replacement from the University of London rather than a counterfeit? For these questions, we do not think that Ms. Tsai can get around them with no explanation to the people of Taiwan. When we looked for Ms. Tsai's PhD thesis, it had been missing until she sent a dubious copy 35 years overdue to the LSE library. When the tardy thesis was cataloged finally in the library, it was written with excessive copyright restrictions. On the other hand, when we looked for Ms. Tsai's doctoral diploma, it was nowhere to be seen. Yet, once it was displayed in public, it bore an incorrect vice-chancellor signature. All these mysteries about Tsai's doctoral thesis and diploma cannot pass muster with anyone's common sense. Yet with the investigation, the rays of light have begun to shine, and the truth will surface from ambiguous darkness.
1984年 LSE 得到法学博士的学位的人有107位，中间只有1位，因为不晓得什么原因被撤回了他的学位。那其他106位，除了蔡英文总统以外，每一个人都有论文的文本在图书馆里，只有蔡英文总统没有。
So the paper goes on to explain that there was a scandal at LSE regarding Gaddafi's son. It was believed that his thesis was ghostwritten and plagiarized from other sources. LSE Director Howard Davies resigned in 2011 to take responsibility. Therefore, LSE does have a history of accepting large donations to cover up for academic fraud.
这个格达费的事情比蔡同学的事情要单纯多了，至少人家的这个捐款是格达费的这个捐给了这个基金会，有名有姓，人家没有隐匿啊，不 不像这个48万英镑 anonymous donor。所以格达费的儿子的这个所谓论文丑闻，如果叫丑闻的话，那我们就真的不知道蔡同学这个叫做什么文。
Taiwan Research Program. Earlier than the North Africa Research Program, the Taiwan Research Program was established at LSE in 2003. I do not know whether TRP received monetary donations from Taiwan. However, I noticed that the co-director of TRP, Dr. Fenglong Shi, has been vocal lately in defending Ms. Tsai by baiting Taiwan's media outlets for creating inaccurate news. While Dr. Shi has every right to exercise her freedom of speech, her official duties at LSE have nothing to do with the school's thesis acquisition or issuance degrees. Dr. Shi often overstepped her bounds, rendering inappropriate remarks and making people mull over her motivations. Several media outlets in Taiwan have violated journalistic objectivity to circulate news released by Dr. Shi as the TRP co-director. For instance, Taiwan's Liberty Times published a sensational report on July 12th in an irresponsible and discretionary manner. This report was headlined, "Tsai's opponents and pro-independence supporters contend fake diploma. TRP co-director calls an end to slandering," and used Dr. Shi's Facebook posts in part as the basis of its reportage, with the intent to make distorted reports on the thesis/diploma issue. For instance, Number 1, Dr. Shi claimed on her Facebook page that the doctoral certificate displayed by Tsai on her visit to D-Card was a replacement certificate issued in 2015. Yet, citing this news source, Liberty Times fine-tuned Dr. Shi's claim by saying that the replacement was issued at a point in time between 2012 to 2018. Why the fine-tuning? Number 2, Dr. Shi stated, as to the question of why Ms. Tsai did not present the original certificate of her PhD issued in 1984, it is up to her choice, and the LSE does not intend to inquire her personal business and is not obligated to provide a clarification. I would like to ask Dr. Shi to review the official requirement and procedure for issuing a replacement for a lost or damaged diploma before making her irresponsible remarks. For Ms. Tsai's inability to display an original PhD diploma, anyone with reasons can easily deduce that there are only 3 possibilities, including A. Ms. Tsai never earned a PhD from the LSE, B. Ms. Tsai lost her degree certificate, or C. Ms. Tsai's certificate was damaged beyond repair. These possibilities were never about Ms. Tsai's personal rights. Can Ms. Tsai have an explanation about the fake replacement? Dr. Shi stated, no matter the reason for the replacement, it is completely within the reasonable range of an individual's life experience. If anyone questions Tsai's degree legitimacy, it is tantamount to questioning LSE's academic integrity. In fact, any school in the UK has its own regulations and requirements for certificate reissues. Dr. Shi's remarks on reasonable range of an individual's life experience and questioning LSE's academic integrity can only be described as Orwellian nonsense. Dr. Shi has served as co-director of TRP for years. Her work with the Taiwan Research Program has absolutely nothing to do with student theses or issuance of degrees. Yet, how can she act as if she were the spokesperson for the London School of Economics?
LSE 的图书馆的主管已经给我们信说，从来没有看过、没有收过蔡英文女士的任何的论文。
Decentralization of organization. However, beginning with the 2007 to 2008 academic year, LSE became a de facto independent university, drifting away from the University of London. As such, all PhD candidates have no longer been required to submit the final copies of their approved theses to Senate House Library, though degree certificates would still bear the signature of Vice Chancellor of the University of London. LSE has since then awarded all of its own degrees by itself. Ms. Tsai was enrolled in an MPhil/PhD program in LSE's earlier days. Therefore, she would have been required to submit a final copy of her approved thesis to Senate House Library if she had passed her Viva examination, while also delivering another copy of the same thesis to the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. Only when Ms. Tsai fulfilled these old-time requirements could she be awarded a PhD degree by the University of London. However, with the development of organization decentralization as mentioned above, Senate House Library has no longer kept any hard copies of theses in its archives, even though this library has continued to keep an official catalog for all previously submitted theses. Today, all hard copies of these theses are stored in the libraries of all subordinate colleges within the University of London.
所以开始他说要寄了一份，用传真寄了一份文本给LSE 图书馆。
Hello, I have been looking for a PhD thesis by Ing-wen Tsai, who was awarded a PhD degree from LSE in 1984. This thesis is titled Unfair Trade Practices and Safeguard Actions and interests me as I am an economist in the United States. I found this thesis' information in the following website. However, the information about the cited thesis is quite limited. Can you please let me know how I can access the PhD thesis authored by Ing-wen Tsai? Thank you very much for your time. Juan Lin. Email from Juan Lin to LSE, May 29, 2019. His conclusions are: 1. Senate House Library and IALS have never received the final copy of Ms. Tsai's doctoral thesis. Number 2. The PhD diploma that Ms. Tsai displayed in person was a counterfeit or forgery. Number 3. Bar Ms. Tsai, all other 108 LSE PhDs of 1983 to 84 had their PhD thesis cataloged in Senate House Library. Number 4. Ms. Tsai's thesis had never been cataloged in the British Library prior to the month of June 2015. And Number 5. Ms. Tsai's student record has nothing entered to indicate that she passed an oral defense examination in 1983-84, or that she submitted the final copy of an approved thesis to the designated university libraries. These proofs suffice to corroborate that LSE did not award to Ms. Tsai a PhD in law in 1984. My detailed analysis of these proved findings are given in the following subsections, respectively.
英国伦敦大学跟英国伦敦政经学院都在跟我们的英国的律师团在交涉当中，他们当然一开始呢就会用对付这个 Michael Richardson 的方法，就告诉他们说，虽然你有这个 Freedom of Information Act 作为你的保障，但是呢，我们仍然认为相关的事情是属于蔡同学的隐私，所以我们为了保护当事人的 privacy， 我们有权利拒绝 Freedom of Information Act。当然啦，这是骗一骗一般人，骗骗记者可以，律师怎么会信你这一套呢？你到底有没有拿到博士学位？你的博士学位的这个论文是什么时候？谁签过名？谁口试的？这个怎么会是个人的隐私呢？
University of London Internal Review refuses to name Tsai Ing-wen thesis examiners claiming Privacy Act exemption from public disclosure. Following a 6-week internal review by the University of London, the identity of Republic of China in exile President Tsai Ing-wen's thesis examiners will remain off-limits to the public. Rosalind Frendo, Director of Compliance and Secretary to the Board, upheld the earlier decision of Kit Good, Data Protection and Information Compliance Manager, that the Privacy Act exempted such information from public disclosure. Frendo called the identification of university examiners personal data and denied a Freedom of Information request. The identity of Tsai's London School of Economics thesis examiners was called into question last year after Tsai belatedly submitted her 1984 thesis, 35 years late. However, the thesis submitted last summer to the LSE library was not a finished, signed thesis. Instead, the tardy thesis entitled Unfair Trade Practices and Safeguard Actions appeared to be a draft document patching together several separate papers. Tsai has not named the thesis examiners, but has written in a memoir they were so impressed they wanted to give her a double degree. The London School of Economics declined to identify the thesis examiners but stated that they conducted a viva with Tsai on October 16, 1983. Inexplicably, the viva date was a Sunday, an uncommon day for such a review. When pressed on the matter, Rachel Maguire, Information and Records Manager, directed all further inquiries to the LSE parent body, the University of London. After an initial denial of the identities by the university, Rosalind Frendo undertook an internal review of the matter. Frendo will not talk about the thesis except to explain why the names of the examiners are exempt from public disclosure. Frendo wrote, "The university does consider that the information, which comprises part of a student record, is personal data. Students will have a high expectation that records of their registration and the attendance at the university, which may reference a number of factors relating to their professional and personal life, would not be subject to public disclosure. Even in the case of a PhD thesis, where there is an expectation that the thesis would be publicly available, there is no expectation that future records of the assessment would be disclosed. I believe in this case, the legitimate interests of a third party do not outweigh the rights of the data subjects in the discourse of further detail from the student's record. I do not believe that the requirements for transparency outweighs the privacy of individuals in the context of this request. I have reviewed the request and conclude that the university was correct to take this position, which is a default position it holds for all its students and alumni. I have then gone on to assess the engagement of the exemption and find that the university has taken a reasonable position in its response. The academic controversy surrounding Tsai's thesis has dropped from the news, although it continues to be debated in the social media. Frendo's decision that the thesis examiners will not be identified is likely to renew charges of critics that Tsai did not actually earn her degree, that the University of London is covering up an embarrassing mistake. First of all, October 16, 1983 is in fact Sunday. Regarding important things that happened that day, I don't see Tsai Ing-wen taking her thesis oral examination at the London School of Economics. Later on, we will see that it is possible, without too much hassle, for third-person parties to find out who the Viva examiners for PhD graduates in 1984 were. All officially turned in theses in 1984 are publicly displayed at the library, and therefore their oral examiners are all listed and signed for on the front page of the thesis. This is all considered to be public information. Only for Tsai Ing-wen is this considered to be private information because she has no oral examiners. Senate House never received Tsai's thesis. At the outset, I sent my first inquiry email to the LSE library on May 29th, kicking off the investigation. This email addressed LSE library staff. Why is the PhD thesis by Ing-wen Tsai searchable using Ethos, an online search system of the British Library, but not using the LSE library inquiry system? Shortly, Ms. Ruth Orson, a library assistant from LSE's Research Support Services, replied on June 4th. Her reply provided critical information for my investigation, and that she made 3 unambiguous messages as follows. 1. LSE library had never had a copy of Ms. Tsai's PhD thesis. 2. At the University of London, Senate House Library has never received a copy of Ms. Tsai's PhD thesis. 3. At the University of London, IALS Library does not have Ms. Tsai's PhD thesis either. Let's take a look at the email. Hello Juan, Dr. Tsai's thesis is unavailable, I'm afraid. LSE Library has never had a copy of this thesis. All PhDs from that period were awarded under the University of London banner and would have been first sent to Senate House Library, and this being under law, would also have gone to the IALS. Unfortunately, Senate House Library apparently never received a copy, and the IALS are unable to find their copy. We had to make extensive searches when Dr. Tsai stood for election, and I am sorry to disappoint. Best wishes, Ruth, Library Assistant.
他这本论文上面其实连这个整个大学的全名都没有写完全，它的格式跟1984年拿到学位的人的格式完全不一致。然后各位可以看它那里面也说了，它整个的内容是用 copy 影印的方式，都有影印的黑边呈现。它只有在前言的部分是用新的打字，用新的打字，甚至在中间它用铅笔去改错字。最不可思议的是，这本论文有6页遗失掉。这样的论文 ，LSE 是世界数一数二最有名的社会科学的大学。这样的论文可能被 LSE 接受，作为一个博士学位的一个颁授吧。
These messages are unambiguous and important to the investigation. Now, it is clear that be it a hard copy, a digital file, or its metadata, Ms. Tsai's PhD thesis has never existed anywhere in each of the 3 school libraries with Senate House, IALS, and LSE, respectively. These messages were leaked out to the public through Mr. Chang-Ching Chao, publishing an article on Taiwan's news outlets on June 11th. This helpful library assistant made it explicitly clear in a reply email dated June 4th that all doctors of philosophy from that period were awarded under the University of London banner, and their theses would have been sent first to Senate House Library, and they would have also gone to IALS as required by law. However, neither Senate House Library nor IALS has received a copy of Ms. Tsai's thesis. As noted earlier, LSE Library did receive a tardy and sloppily edited thesis from Ms. Tsai on June 20th, 2019, after it had been missing for 35 years. As such, the thesis became a searchable item in the LSE Library's inquiry system for the first time over the past 35 years. This sudden development was nothing but an echo of Ms. Ruth Orson's reply email. Apparently, Ms. Ruth Orson's reply on June 4th implied that Ms. Tsai did not submit the final copy of her thesis, if approved, to Senate House Library and IALS Library in 1984. Therefore, it was impossible that she could have been awarded a PhD in law at that time. To ensure the full proof of our findings, I emailed Miss Ruth Orson immediately on June 4th, as soon as she made her reply. Let's take a look at the email. Dear Ruth, thank you very much for your information about Miss Ing-wen Tsai's PhD thesis. Indeed, it is disappointing that we cannot find her thesis in each of these three places: LSE Library, Senate House Library, and Institute of Advanced Law School. Can you explain why this thesis has just seemed to disappear in the world? For your information, I can easily find other PhD theses in the early 1980s. Why is this Tsai's PhD thesis nowhere to be seen? This is quite unusual, isn't it? Your further information will be greatly appreciated. Best regards, Juan. In the email, I asked, how come Tsai's thesis just vanished anywhere in the Senate House Library, IALS Library, and LSE Library? This helpful library assistant wrote me back on June 6, saying that no further information can be provided. She also emphasized that the LSE Library, Senate House Library, and IALS Library have all searched extensively for the so-called thesis, and unfortunately, it is missing.
这个他从来没有透露指导教授是谁。他在这里面说了，那个先生呢，他其实只是一个学士，是一个写杂文的记者。LSE 可以让一个学士去作为一个博士学位的指导教授吗？ LSE 会冒这样的风险吗？而事实上，这个人从来没有出现过，是因为大家在追问之下，他的名字出现了，而这个人在2年前过世了。
The above table is the roster of vice chancellors of the University of London. We will look at this later. First, Tsai claimed that she obtained a PhD in law at LSE in 1984. However, the signature shown on the certificate did not belong to Lord Randolph Quirk, Vice Chancellor at the University of London from 1981 to 85. Rather, the certificate bore a signature from Adrian Smith, who served as Vice Chancellor of the University of London recently from 2012 to 2018. To corroborate this point, we found a roster of vice chancellors at the University of London over the years, sourced from Wikipedia. Second, although Dr. Falong Shi, TRP co-director, and DPP legislator Mr. Wong came to explain that Ms. Tsai's handheld certificate shown on July 10th was a replacement, their explanations are groundless. In fact, as early as Professor Lee posted the same questionable certificate on his Facebook on June 10th, I reached out to the University of London, and Ms. Teresa Byrne, as head of the University Diplomas Production Office, replied on June 12th with an unambiguous clarification given below. Dear Juan, thank you for your email. Replacement certificates are only issued in cases of proven loss or accidental destruction, and they will of course still be identical to the original document. Same wording, same signature. Regards, Teresa Byrne, Head, Diploma Production Office. As mentioned earlier, Dr. Shi attempted to exculpate Ms. Tsai by saying it is within the rights of Ms. Tsai to not present the original doctoral certificate. The LSE has no intent to question her personal business and is not obligated to provide a clarification. Dr. Shi went on to say that no matter the reason for the replacement, it is completely within the reasonable range of an individual's life experience. Any questions against Tsai's degree legitimacy are tantamount to questioning LSE's academic integrity. In contrast to the clear and professional email from Ms. Teresa Byrne, head of Diploma Production Office, I must express my strong disapproval of Dr. Shi's obscurity and equivocation. While attempted to sidestep all the crucial questions, Dr. Shi should do right by herself to have a thorough read of the application of replacement degree certificate available on the LSE website. Third, in Ms. Tsai's autobiography titled From Scrambled Eggs with Onions to Her Bento Box, Tsai Ing-wen's Taste of Life published in 2011, it is mentioned that her thesis and oral defense were so impeccable that her dissertation committee decided in 1984 to award her a PhD in law with an added note emphasizing she has extraordinary scholarship in international trade. Nonetheless, nowhere on the certificate shown by Ms. Tsai on July 10th can we find any wording similar to extraordinary scholarship in international trade. Fourth, according to A, only one replacement certificate will ever be issued to an applicant. However, Ms. Tsai had obtained 2 replacement certificates, one in 2015 and the other in 2010, so these 2 replacement certificates must be fake documents which Tsai somehow obtained from unknown sources. Clearly enough, these 4 attestations mentioned above provides strong evidence that the doctoral certificate displayed by Ms. Tsai is a counterfeit or forgery. According to Ms. Teresa Byrne, the Diploma Production Office of the University of London can never issue a replacement certificate that differs from the original document. For instance, in terms of wording and signatures, the forging problem is gravely serious. Not only does Ms. Tsai bear legal responsibility to possible forgery, but also Professor Chung Chi Lee is also complicit in this shady deal unless he was completely in the dark. We would hereby make two requests. First, the University of London should provide an official copy of its replacement processing notification issued to Ms. Tsai, and second, Ms. Tsai should present an official document for her replacement application. We do not think that any unilateral acknowledgement from either side would suffice or have any credential.
Replacement certificates are only issued in case of proven loss or accidental destruction， 就是我前面也提过啦，就是我补发可以，但是要证明，就是说证明你是掉了或者某些意外的毁损。他说呢，and they will of course， 他们当然 will be identical， 将会一模一样。教个英文字 identical 就是完全一样啊。To the original document， 会跟原始文件，就是原始的毕业证书完全一样。
好，钢印在这边。
那这个 officer 呢，这个 head， 他怕你不知道什么叫完全一样啊，是完全一样的什么呢？他说 same wording， 一样的字句 ，same signatures， 一样的签名。好，那你说那个1984年的那个校长长得像哈利波特的，几年前挂了嘛？那怎么可能叫他签名呢？拍谁？他们都是用签名章，他们通通都保留。1984年科技没有落后到那个地步，除了打字没有办法对齐之外，没有落后到那种说连一个章的图像都没有办法保存啊。这个 diploma officer head 他讲得很清楚，在6月12号回复的，这到目前为止都是正常询问、正常答案。意思就是说，黑手还没有介入以前，因为黑手介入的稍微慢了一点。待会儿呢，我们就会来看一看黑手什么时候介入。我的判断，黑手是6月12号介入了。6月12号发完这封信之后没有多久，这个 Diploma Office 的 Head 可能被关切了。
Figure 13, email from Mr. Daniel O'Connor, Head of Media Relations, Communications Division at LSE, June 14th, 2019. Dear Juan Lin, thank you for your correspondence. I have been asked to respond with some more information. Further to your remarks, the records of both London School of Economics and Political Science and the University of London confirm that Tsai Ing-wen was awarded a PhD in law 1984, and the student record shows that the thesis was submitted. For your interest, I have attached a scan of relevant entry in the LSE calendar of 1985-86, which is an official public record of awards and degrees given to LSE students for the previous year. As previously circulated, all PhDs from that period were awarded under the University of London banner and would have been sent first to their Senate House library. They clearly received their copy because otherwise it would not have been processed and appear on their catalog, and from there to appear on the British Library catalog. We have been in correspondence with the University of London about the thesis, and extensive checks have been made. The Senate House are presently unable to find their copy. We are also in touch with colleagues regarding the other pieces of information requested. However, some of them are restricted by UK data protection laws. Kind regards, Daniel O'Connor. Continuing from the previous page, my investigation henceforth turned to the validity of Ms. Tsai's doctoral certificate. Unfortunately, Ms. Ruth Orson no longer answered my follow-up emails for reasons unknown to me. Instead, on June 14th, Mr. Daniel O'Connor took over to correspond with me. In his email, Mr. Daniel O'Connor as PR personnel provided messages. In his email, Mr. Daniel O'Connor as a PR personnel provided messages opposite to what Ms. Ruth Orson as a library professional, library assistant, research support services said in her June 4th email. According to Mr. Daniel O'Connor, records from the University of London and LSE confirmed that Ing-wen Tsai was awarded a PhD in law in 1984, and her student record shows that the thesis was submitted. Now, let us examine this PR personnel's proofs in an in-depth analysis. First, Mr. Daniel O'Connor, a PR personnel, said that the name Ing-wen Tsai appeared in a 1983-84 award roster, which he sent to me as an attachment by email, see Appendix B.
然后6月14号第二天，好来了，果然来了，接踵而来。现在来介入的人是谁呢？是 Media Relations 媒体关系的负责人。林环强教授不是媒体，他调查这件事情的时候，媒体也还没有正式介入英国系统的查询，所以为什么找了一个媒体关系室的主任开始介入回林环强教授的信呢？我必须说，林环强教授也没有写信给他呀，为什么他会主动写信给林怀强呢？你不觉得奇怪吗？林怀强教授写信去给图书馆员，写信去给这个学位产制的负责人，单纯的查询他的论文，单纯的查询他的学位证书的正确性。为什么媒体关系负责人开始介入呢？介入什么？我念给你听，你就会发现8月份还见鬼了。他写的落长，我只摘一段。他说，记录显示，也没说什么记录哈。伦敦政经学院跟伦敦大学都证实，蔡英文1984年拿到博士学位，而且记录显示论文已缴交。这个有趣了 ，Media Relations， 我们没问你，你竟然跑来跟我们讲说，记录显示蔡英文的论文已缴交。他又不是这个 librarian， 他也不是 diploma production officer， 他用什么身份来说明蔡同学论文已缴交？从光这个地方你就可以看到他说谎，所以我已经告诉英国的律师，他是同案被告，因为蔡同学已经打脸你了嘛，猪队友，你的主子会背叛你，会出卖你，因为他已经说过了嘛，总统府发言人说过了嘛。今年的6月份，这个东西才上架的嘛，6月28号才第一次重见江湖，到了英国的这个 LSE 的 library 嘛，所以你的媒体关系室的负责人，你见鬼了！你说这个东西交了吗？而且这个是公文书喽，哈，有抬头，有这个所有的内容啊，这已经形同电子公文书了，所以这个英国的这位兄弟。你犯法了。
According to the roster, a total of 107 students, including Ing-wen Tsai, graduated with a PhD in year 1983 to 84. There were 3 PhDs in law, 6 in arts, and 98 in economics. I spent much time looking into the metadata of these graduates' PhD theses through Senate House Library's online inquiry system. As the roster is lengthy, I summarized my findings in 3 tables. To facilitate the analysis, I provided online links in each table so that readers can click on the link of each graduate to look up his/her PhD thesis catalog in Senate House Library. If the thesis is cataloged, the specific thesis is a searchable item and the result is labeled as yes in the table's searchable column. If not, the result is instead labeled as no in the same column. I noticed in the curation process that out of the 107 graduates, the doctoral degree of Pauline Frances Creasy was revoked in 1992. This can be verified by clicking on the online LSE link. This is why Senate House Library no longer has a thesis record in the case of Pauline Frances Creasy. After eliminating Pauline Frances Creasy from the award roster, the investigation finds that out of the remaining 106 graduates, all but Ing-wen Tsai have a complete record of their PhD theses in Senate House Library. These findings confirm that library professional Ms. Ruth Orson was right all along, in contrast to what the PR personnel, Mr. Daniel O'Connor, said in his June 14th email. Furthermore, out of the remaining 106 graduates, 3 were PhD in law. They are Jose Enrique Molina Vega, Michael Francis Smith, and Ing-wen Tsai. As required at that time, all PhD theses in law had to be submitted to IALS Library in addition to Senate House Library. Unfortunately, but not surprisingly, Ms. Tsai's thesis is unavailable in IALS Library either. In contrast, for Dr. Molina Vega and Dr. Smith, their theses can easily be accessed through IALS's inquiry system. Moreover, their hardbound theses are stored and archived in IALS Library. To verify these findings, we can click on each of the following 3 online links. In the investigation, we also found 3 other PhDs in economics who are missing from LSE's 1983 to 84 award roster. these missing PhDs given below, where one can click on each link to see the metadata of each PhD thesis. Our search results using the inquiry system of Senate House Library indicate that the situation of Ing-wen Tsai is too peculiar to accept the hypothesis that she passed the oral examination and was awarded a PhD in law in 1984. It is clear that Ms. Tsai has been lying all along. It is also clear that the proofs provided by Daniel O'Connor as head of media relations do not speak for themselves to support the hypothesis. Here we are compelled to question the accuracy of the award roster of the 1983-84 academic year. Its dubious accuracy is also evidenced by the fact that one of the PhDs awarded was revoked in 1992, and 3 other PhDs in economics are missing from the award roster. In this report, all the analyses are based on facts. We have made screenshots or image files of all the search findings for fear of anything unexpected happening to undermine the report's accuracy or reliability. Not cataloged in British Library prior to June 2015. Let us now look at our 4th finding from the investigation. This finding can confirm that reality does not support what the PR personnel, Mr. Daniel O'Connor, said in his June 14th email either. In this email, Mr. Daniel O'Connor claimed that Senate House Library did receive a copy of Tsai's thesis, and he justified such a claim by arguing this way. If Senate House Library did not, the thesis would not have appeared on the library's catalog and then on the British Library catalog. Before we demonstrate our 4th finding, let us recall our 3rd finding, which has spoken for itself. The theses of 2 other PhDs in law of 1984 have been cataloged in both Senate House Library and IALS Library, and their hardbound theses are available in the latter library. In stark contrast, Ms. Tsai's thesis has been nowhere to be found, be it in the catalog metadata or its physical hard copy. Now let us go on to look at our 4th finding. It is clear that PR personnel Mr. Daniel O'Connor attempted to validate Tsai's thesis submission to Senate House Library in 1984 by claiming that the British Library has a catalog entry of Tsai's work. To challenge Mr. Daniel O'Connor's claim of this sort, I have obtained an indisputable proof from the British Library citing the Freedom of Information Act. This proof is powerful enough to invalidate what Mr. Daniel O'Connor claimed, as I elaborate below. First, I wrote on June 21st an email to Mr. James Courthold, who was Information Compliance Manager of the British Library. He wrote back on July 18th to address my FOIA inquiry. His reply email is attached in Appendix C. This FOIA inquiry addressed 2 key questions. How come this thesis's metadata can be found using the British Library's Ethos inquiry system, given that Ms. Tsai's doctoral thesis does not exist in the repository catalog of Senate House Library, IALS Library, or LSE Library within the University of London? Who let the thesis enter Ethos? To answer these 2 questions, let us quote the Information Compliance Manager's critical messages adapted from the 2nd paragraph of his July 18th email. We have considered your requests and can confirm we hold a record in Ethos of the thesis, but not the full file. The record was added in June 2015 by a member of staff in response to a user's speculative request for the thesis. We have a note on the Ethos record stating that the item is missing from university. When an item is not held but a request for it is made, the Ethos admin team will contact the institution to request a copy for digitization, and it is likely the institution who advised the copy was missing, which has resulted in the note being placed on the record. The admin team also usually verifies requests to check they are valid thesis titles at the time of the request. However, the library holds no documentary records of what checks were carried out in 2015. It is clear from the above statement that the record of Tsai's thesis was added in June 2015 to the British Library catalog so that the thesis became searchable just 4 years ago using the library's Ethos system. The same statement also mentions that the British Library made the addition to its repository system after its librarian consulted LSE Library upon a user's speculative request for the thesis. Here's another conundrum. At that time, June 2015, given that all the University of London libraries, including LSE Library, did not possess any record of Ms. Tsai's thesis, how could it be possible that LSE managed to submit the metadata of Tsai's thesis to the British Library? I hope that the LSE has an answer for this critical question. I also noticed that some people in Taiwan were starting to investigate Tsai's thesis in 2015 prior to the presidential election of 2016. Why was the timing so close to the creation of metadata for Ms. Tsai's thesis in the British Library? This seems another interesting question, isn't it? Tsai's student record revealing no thesis submission. Lastly, the 5th piece of information came from Ms. Tsai's student record, which Taiwan's presidential office displayed recently on September 4th. Ms. Tsai's student record also points to the implausibility that she was awarded a PhD in 1984. We can ascertain that all of the findings we have mentioned above are in conformity with their student record. This student record contains several pieces of critical information that merit our attention. First, Ms. Tsai was registered as a graduate student of the MPhil/PhD program at LSE for 2 academic years, 1980 to 81 and 1981 to 82, and the course length was only 21 months. Second, after the 21-month course length, she withdrew from the course of the MPhil PhD program on November 10, 1982. Third, after November 10, 1982, she was deregistered and therefore had no active sessions in the academic years of 1982-83 and 1983-84. For instance, no record of fees paid. Fourth, surprisingly, given that she became deregistered, Ms. Tsai's title of thesis was approved to make a change on June 19, 1983, and this change was for the degree of Bachelor of Science in Laws. Fifth, more surprisingly, she was awarded an unknown degree in February 1984. The specific date is unknown. What was the awarded degree on Ms. Tsai's student record? It was not disclosed there at all. However, the undisclosed degree could never be a doctoral degree on account of the student record having nothing entered to indicate she passed an oral defense examination or that she submitted the final copy of an approved PhD thesis for deposit in the designated school libraries. It is very likely that the unknown degree should be a Bachelor of Science or a Master of Philosophy, which was often awarded to a PhD candidate who did not pass his or her oral defense examination. So was Ms. Tsai awarded a PhD at LSE? The answer is absolutely no, as her own student record has said it all.
最重要的，我想陈教授等一下都可以帮我证实，所有的博士学位，他在第一页一定有所有参与评审这本论文的教授的签名，这个一定要附在一个论文的上面的。台大都是绝对要做到这一点的，从来没有看到其他的教授的签名在上面。
这完全是一个逻辑谬误的推论呐。如果你口试没有通过，没有缴交论文，就不会有文凭。既然没有文凭，你要去申请一个补发，学校会申请给你吗？就好像以我自己为例，我是台大毕业的。如果我不是台大毕业的学生，我要回去学校说啊，我的学位证书需要补充来证明，学校会发给我吗？那是不可能的事情。所以这是个逻辑谬误。
So when questioned about the oral examination or the thesis itself, Tsai Ing-wen in the presidential office use a reverse sort of logic. They assume and insist that the diploma they are showing is real, that they couldn't have gotten it unless she really had a PhD degree from LSE back in 1984. Therefore, a thesis was turned in and an oral examination did take place. So by showing you the quote-unquote final result, everything else that was required to get this piece of paper must have taken place. Tsai Ing-wen in the presidential office cannot present any evidence that an oral examination actually took place. This is why they use this kind of logic, reverse logic, and say that anyone who questions whether the oral examination or the legitimacy of the thesis are not being rational, they bank everything on the replacement certificate that they were showing.
可是大家记得吗？蔡总统的自传说他的论文多么优秀到教授为了要不要给他论文开了2个小时的会，最后决定要给他两个不太好意思给他1个半学位。
过了一阵子，我的指导老师就把头探出来，他说：“Miss Tsai，你进来一下。”那我就进去了。他说我们讨论了很久，倒也不是讨论要不要给你博士学位，我们要讨论是给你1个博士学位还是给你2个博士学位。那最荒谬的事情是什么？我有3个 examiner， 是3个口试委员。这个因为我的论文是法律跟经济的混合体，所以一个是我的指导老师，一个是经济学家，一个是学法律。那个律师就说你的经济部分写得不错，那个经济学家说我法律的部分写得不错。这个大概是有史以来伦敦政经学院最令人惊奇的这个博士论文考试。然后最后他们决定给我1.5个学位。
这也是在学术界从来没有听说过的，学位可以给1个半的。我们蔡总统他既然可以说得出口，
好，我就以为我已经拿到学位，结果我又等了半年才拿到证书。就是这个英国人的这种 这种速度哦，我就不知道为什么我那么快写完论文，但是他们要我等1年以后才拿到我的证书哦。
就用假的博士的证书，28岁可以回台湾做政治大学的客座教授，然后一帆风顺，一直在做政务上面的事情，甚至代表我们国家去参加贸易谈判。